How's it going, New World? Sethphir here, and I have a lot of people asking me about my tank build, about what is good to use in terms of tanking, and I wanted to break that down here today and show you exactly the ideal that I am aiming for and what I am trying to get in terms of tanking and what I feel is best in the game and how you should build a proper tank in PVE combat. So we're talking about PVE specifically. This is not about PvP, as that talent tree will look much differently. So first we're going to go ahead and start by taking a look at the attributes on the character stat sheet, right? And if you can take a look at my strength and con balance, it seems a little odd, right? Why do I have this weird balance? I'm not hitting certain breakpoints. There are foods in the game that give you statistics, and there is a specific one that gives you 40 to Constitution, so I'm using this food to boost up my stat points to a certain threshold, and we'll talk about which of those thresholds that you do want and kind of go over those classifications here. So as that will give me 40 Constitution, when I use this food, I will be at the 200 marker, which will increase my armor by 20%. There is a 250 marker, which gives you a 80% damage reduction for one attack when you're at full HP, but it is also on a 1 minute cooldown, so this makes it very low value, as the odds of this occurring at the right time is probably not very high, and on top of that, it only occurs once a minute, which is just abysmal in my opinion. And then we have the final talent for Constitution, which gives you a 20% duration on stun, slow, and root spells. Now, melee weapons do not really have root, with the exception of the hatchet, which does have a root if you hit them directly in the back with the leap attack if you talent for it. Melee does have a few slows, and it has some stuns, but the thing about stun is that as soon as you hit the monster, they are unstunned anyways, so 20% stun duration really does nothing for you. It's not a true stun, it's just like it's like a sleep in other games. So we don't care about these two last bubble points here, this 250 and this 300. This is kind of irrelevant. The only thing that we care about is hitting 200 so that we get 20% increase to armor, which would hit us a 20% increase to both physical and elemental armor, thus increasing our survivability. Now, there are two things to talk about when you look at an end-game tank, and that is going to be the amount of aggro or threat he can generate, which comes from the damage that you deal, and also the amount of times you can use your abilities that have taunt on them. So ideally, you want to use your abilities constantly that have taunt on them, because the way taunt works is it bumps you up to the highest threat a little bit above the highest threat when you use taunt, right? So taunting before an enemy is engaged does not do anything for you other than that initial threat grab. If nobody else has done anything, it's going to be a little bit more complex than that. They will stick on you for a small duration, but taunting after some things have happened is generally better. Now, if we take a look at the thresholds for strength, we can see that we're going to do more damage when enemies are slowed or rooted. We are going to do more stamina damage. We are going to regenerate more stamina when performing attacks, which is also important. And then the final talent, we are going to get our light and heavy attacks having grit on them, which means we can't be interrupted, which is also going to be very important for DPS. The total stat breakdown, when you get to the end game, each of these armor pieces is going to give 25. Every weapon that you have will give a sum total of 30 stats, and that is just going to come from whatever that breakdown is. So if you have a sword, the maximum it can give is 15 stats. The shield can also give a maximum of 15 stats, adding to a 30 sum total. And then a two-handed weapon like this axe is 26, or the spear is 28, it can get all the way up to 30. So that's going to be 60 from the two weapons that we have equipped, and then this is going to be 125 over here on the side, so we are up to 185 stats. Each jewelry piece can be 25 total if it is a 600 gear score, so we'll be working up towards that because not everyone has 600 gear score right now, but that's the number we need to keep in mind and adjust as we get there. So with an additional 75 there, that should put us at 260 stat points. that are available to us, and then the 40 that is coming from the food. So that should be 300. So the developers have actually designed this very well. So we have this 300 in mind. We also have 190 points that we can assign ourselves just from leveling up at level 60. And in addition to that, we get 5 points in every category guaranteed. So if you are focusing on 2 categories, you get those bonus 5 points here, and in Constitution, that means 10, plus the 190 you can choose, which will give you a total of 200, plus the 300 that we can get from gear and food. So as you can see, it works out very nicely to be 300 in one stat and 200 in another stat. So I believe that for tanking, you want to aim towards 300 strength and 200 constitution, because this will give you enough health to survive every hit and give you the highest armor increase while making sure that you do enough damage and threat to keep aggro on the monsters, but more importantly, speed up the run and make it faster. So that's going to be your statistics breakdown. This is very important. You want to aim towards 300 strength and aim towards 200 con. I would say make sure you have 200 con so you're as tanky as possible, and then worry about strength after that. For me, I dumped all of my points into strength. My con is coming from my gear, and then also a little bit from my stat food of choice, which would be the 40 con rabbit stew, which would bump me up there as well. So if you choose for your gear to give you con, like all these void bent pieces that I crafted, that's 125 con. And then I have the stat food coming in, that's 165. So I don't need much more constitution to bump me up to that 200 threshold, aside from maybe a jewelry piece or so that would get me into that range. Just keep in mind that you're going to have to work with what you got, so you're not going to have this perfect stat distribution. You just need to hit 200 con and dump the rest into strength so that you deal damage. So now let's go ahead and talk about weapons, and I went ahead and reset my weapons because I want to show you what the best build is PvE wise, and I've done the math on this. I feel and tested it in practicality, and I feel I got a good balance of what is going to be the highest damage and also give you the highest mitigation. So we're going to start with the left side tree for Swordmaster, and we're going to pick up this first talent called Empowered Stab, which is very important. Every time you do a heavy attack, you're going to get 30% bonus damage for 5 seconds, which is quite a significant boost. So your general way to start off combat would be to use a heavy attack and then do a light chain and end with a heavy attack at the end of that to just keep that going constantly. So light attack, heavy attack, and that will keep your empower going constantly. You don't have to fully charge your heavy attack. You can do a short version charge like this, like 1, 2, and then whoop, a little quick stab, or you can hold it for full damage, but it takes quite a while, as you can see the difference there. Usually I just do a quick stab at the start and then a 1, 2 followed up by a little stab, and that will allow you to get the maximum damage value. Do keep in mind that those attacks between heavy and light are different damage types on the sword, so there may be a situation where you want to use slashing rather than the thrusting from the heavy, but just keep that in mind. So that's going to be our first talent. Our second talent is going to be crit chance on the sword by 10%. This is a very good talent, as not a lot of abilities give you crit chance, and this is a free 10%. This is kind of a no-brainer. The first skill that we're going to be using is Reverse Stab, and I know it sounds weird. You look at it and it's just like, hey, it just does some damage. But if you go to the second talent, you get Grit, which makes you unstoppable. So that means you can use this mechanic to dodge boss mechanics. So if they're taking a big swing that's going to push you back, use Reverse Stab. You will take the damage, but you will not go anywhere. You're going to be stuck where you are, so you can avoid a lot of mechanics with this. And then the final, the other bubble that we got to get down to the bottom talent for Reverse Stab is going to be Opportunist, which just increases your damage if a monster is slowed, which is probably going to happen with some other talents that we will show you here later on. So we're going to go ahead and take this one, and the only reason we take it is because we need to get down to this last tier, and we have to select a talent from this row, and we don't want these other ones. So the final one that we're going to take is Tactician, and this is where the build starts to shine. When you hit with Reverse Stab, all your sword cooldowns are reduced by 25%. That is going to include anything from the defensive tree and anything from the offensive swordmaster tree, including reverse stab itself. The biggest caveat here is when you hit more than one opponent with reverse stab, you actually get more cooldown. So if I hit 4 opponents, my skills are automatically refreshed. So think about that for a moment. If I hit 4 mobs, I can instantly use all my skills again. And this is the nutty part of this build. It just makes it to where you can constantly spam Defiant Stance and have uptime very high. You can spam your other abilities, and we'll go ahead and talk about those right now. So once we have this side locked into place, we can go ahead and commit these points because we know that these are the best options for us over here. That's going to allow us to get the most on this right side. So let's go ahead and go over to the defender side. The first passives that we're going to want to pick up is definitely Sturdy Shield. It gives you 15% physical armor. That's just going to make you tankier. You always want this Elemental Resistance, as you will just flat out negate 10% of all magic damage. It's a fantastic ability. The other passives are going to be Sturdy Grip, which is going to lower the amount of stamina damage you take when you're blocking, which is very important for boss encounters, but also for tanking multiple mobs. The defensive training, which is going to give you Fortify whenever you block any attack, so you can treat this as 10% reduced damage permanently, so this is going to be a very strong ability here. Then we also want High Grip, which is going to do the same thing as Sturdy Grip, but for ranged damage attacks. There are some monsters in the game that like to drain a lot of stamina with their ranged attacks, so this is a great thing to have as well. Now we are going to get into some of our skills of choice, and our skill of choice is going to be Shield Rush for a few reasons. At first glance, it looks like this does not do a lot. It just slightly knocks people back, and you're right, it does very bad damage because this damage is based off your shield, and let's face it, shields do not hit very hard. But then we get into the talents. This one is going to lower the damage of anybody hit by 10% for 4 seconds, which is not a long time, but it is something. And with reverse stab coming in, we will be getting this back constantly, so we will be lowering their damage a lot more often than this 4-second timer. Then we are going to make sure that we go in over here and get defensive or Defiant Stance, because this is a staple for tanks. This is going to be our first taunt with a taunt gem compatible. This will activate a taunt and AoE taunt for everyone around you for 6 seconds, but it also reduces the damage you take by 30% for 8 seconds, so it's going to be your big bread and butter skill. The trade-off is that it has a high cooldown, but the synergy between reverse stab is going to be huge, because I can use Defiant Stance, and if I reverse stab and hit 4 targets, I can immediately use Defiant Stance again, if I want to. I might want to wait for the duration to run out. We're going to grab all the talents, because if you use Defiant Stance above 50%, you're going to get another 20% reduction, which is a 50% total damage reduction, which is massive. And then we're going to take this Restoration, which heals us for a portion of our health when the Defiant Stance ends. It's very nice for dealing with mobs, also 1v1 situations, and also boss monsters. So coming back into the Shield Rush tree, we're going to dump our final talent here in the Intimidating Rush, which is just going to slow monsters around us when we hit them for 30% for 4 seconds. And the reason why we want this is to get the damage bonus from Opportunist, and there also is a damage bonus in the Strength tree that will increase our damage done to slowed, rooted, and stunned monsters. So you're going to get a double damage bonus here, so this is more of an offensive skill, but also provides some utility with the slow. Our final talent in the tree is going to be Defensive Formation. What this does is when you block, you will place an aura around yourself and all allies that will reduce 30% of all damage being taken. So even if you take damage while you're blocking, you're still going to reduce that amount by 30%, and it's great to help your melee that are trying to damage the boss. The final passive is going to be Recuperation, which just simply increases all healing and regeneration on you by 10%. This works with health potions, it works with Defiant Stance's heal, and it also just works with your healer healing you in general. So the final tree is going to look like this. Some good contenders for these, some of the spots that you may want to consider specifically would be this talent, which is going to remove a debuff on you when you heavy attack. It's definitely quite nice, but there's just no room for it damage-wise and statistic-wise, so we have to skip out on it. The only other talent that may be worth considering in the long term would be this blocking gives you a damage boost, but in my opinion, when you have to block this many times, that damage boost is not lasting that long, and it seems a little bit useless versus single targets, as you might take one attack every so often, and you're not getting that much of a damage bonus here. So this is going to be our best value, and this is going to be what the shield defensive thing looks like. And if you can see here, I can't actually see it, but you can see the debuff pop up for me, that little, or the buff icon down at the bottom of my screen where it has the shield up. That means that I am taking 30% reduced damage, and anybody who sets in this circle will also be taking 30% reduced damage. So that is going to be the best build there, and we'll kind of show you what that looks like in action here at the end of the video. But we need to dive into the second weapon that you need to use with the sword and shield, and that is going to be the Warhammer. And I know a lot of people like to talk about hatchet, a lot of people like to talk about great axe, but it is definitely the Warhammer, and I think that a few reasons for that will be very apparent once we kind of go into things. So we'll get into the Warhammer here in just 1 second. There was one final note I want to make on Shield Rush, and the reason why we take this one over a lot of other things is because there is a shield perk that says right here on my shield, when you hit somebody with Shield Rush, you gain Fortify, increasing your damage absorption by 16% for 4 seconds. So what that will do is basically you will be able to have a high uptime on more damage mitigation, and it just makes you incredibly tanky. So you're hardly going to take any damage, and you're going to deal a lot of damage at the same time. So that's the reasoning behind these 3 talents. So I'm going to go ahead and put these in the order that is best suited for me, and I will put that there, and we have the sword tree completed now. So let's move on to Warhammer, and now we will take a look at a lot of the talents in Warhammer. So Warhammer's job is to deal big AoE damage on monster groups. This is for the boss, but it also softens up the targets. So you can have a debuff called Rend, which is going to be right here. Armor Breaker grants the target Rend, reducing damage absorption by 15%. This means that they take 15% more damage constantly. So that makes Armor Breaker our first go-to in the left side tree, as it is a very powerful move. It does a decent amount of damage because it also penetrates armor on top of that. So it's going to do 35% armor penetration and then a flat 140% weapon amount. This will give it grit, which means that you can't be interrupted while doing it. And the final talent here, or the second to final talent, is going to be lasting trauma, which gives it the armor reduction ability. So that means that your entire party, your whole team, will be doing 15% more damage. And this has relatively 100% uptime, as it is 11.4 second cooldown, and this debuff lasts 10 seconds. So if you're hitting it, you will have this up permanently. The final talent is not good, as it only does damage when a target is full health, and that will only happen once, if any, at all. So we will leave that one as is for now. The second talent we're going to be looking at is called the Mighty Gavel. This talent does a lot of damage, as you can see 160% here, but as we go to rank it up, it's going to do more damage to people that are low. It is going to do more stamina damage, and then it will also give you haste when you use the Mighty Gavel attack, and the final talent, Justice for All, when we put enough points in here, will let it attack again a second time, and it's going to do 200% weapon damage this time instead of 160. So it's going to be like you got a full charge heavy attack with bonus damage in AoE range. So this move will hit very, very, very hard. Now we're going to take a look at some passives that we need to get in order to get up to Justice for All. The first thing on our list is going to be Hammer Time. Very catchy name, as it will give you 20% damage boost for 4 seconds when you use a heavy attack. So this is very similar to the sword skill, where you have to use a heavy attack. So what I do is I start with a small heavy, we'll call it a small heavy when it's not fully charged up, and then I will use a regular auto attack after that. The hammer comes in a 2-piece combo, so you attack and then you do another attack. It's very simplistic in its nature, so I would just use a regular attack and then a heavy attack, and then continue doing my damage from there. So this is going to give us a 20% damage boost. It is quite nice. The next talent that you are going to want to look for is called Power Through Pain. It is a very important talent. If you take damage while attacking, you are going to deal 35% more damage, which is absolutely insane. There's so much DPS being added here that it's actually just crazy the amount of value you're going to get from that. So that's definitely something that you need to take. The next move that you may want is going to be Quick Recovery, as it will be giving you a 7% reduction on your hammer abilities, and you will be using a heavy attack in combination with a light attack when you use this hammer time debuff, or buff, power up buff here. So this is going to be another important one. And that will give us to our final talent, which is Justice for All, giving us the second hit on the Mighty Gavel ability, making it a very strong powerhouse in terms of damage. So we're going to go ahead and commit these points, as this is the framework for this side of the tree. There are a few things like damage resistance, a little bit of extra damage when the target's below a certain threshold, armor penetration for standard attacks only, which is definitely not bad, but we'll come back to that here in a moment, as we need to get these two into place. The next tree is going to be getting us towards the Shockwave ability, which is going to start with your choice here. I would say this one's good. It gives you damage absorption if there's a lot of monsters around you. So generally when you have the hammer out, you're AoEing. This one's a pretty good one. The next one is going to reduce stamina damage when you block attacks, but we're probably going to be blocking attacks with our shield more than anything. So we'll go ahead and pass on that one. So we're going to go with Outnumbered just as a placeholder. It's not the most ideal, but it is something. The next one we're going to go with is Shockwave, which is our second taunt ability. This will allow us to do an AoE stun to everyone around us. It is quite nice, as it does taunt everyone around you, but it also has some extra talents here. When we hit somebody with that stun from Shockwave, we'll be reducing their damage by another 10%. And then finally, we can increase the radius of the Shockwave, which does help, as 3 meters is not that far. 4 will help you get a bit of extra splash, but this one is debatable because it is player skill. So if you can comfortably calculate that 3-meter range, then you realistically don't need this meteoric crater, and you could probably find value in some other place. So that's just depends on what you want to do with that. The next talent that we're going to be looking at for very important is going to be Acceleration, which all of your Warhammer cooldowns are reduced by 7% when you hit somebody with a light attack that has an active debuff, which is going to go into another side of the tree that we're going to take a look at here for a second. But this is very important, as you will be doing light attacks because they do the most damage in the shortest amount of time. And there is going to be some sort of a weapon attack combination that you're going to use. So we'll lock this in for now, and I'll show you that. But basically, you're going to start off with a heavy, then use a light, and then another light, and then end that with a heavy, which I just messed up there. So let's try that again. Heavy, double light, and then you're going to go light, and then follow it up with a heavy to end. And that should be that 4-second window, which will give you the most DPS. Total, proccing your hammer time talent, and also allowing you to get a lot of light attacks in to reduce that cooldown even further. So as you can see, we have 3 points left, maybe 4 if you want to not take Meteoric Crater, so the picking is getting slim at this point. You definitely need Concussive Impact, as this will give you 15% bonus damage against anybody inflicted by a Warhammer debuff, so this is going to be very important to have. We're going to go ahead and nab that one, and from this point onward, there's not many other abilities in this tree that's going to give you any value. This one is a good ability, but it only works on purple skills over here, Crowd Crusher skills, and since we only have one, it's not going to get that much value. So we're going to go ahead and look at the other tree, and this is going to be what activates our passives, right? So this says that all Warhammer abilities apply exhaust, slowing the target's stamina regeneration by 15% for 5 seconds. Now, this is not the best debuff, but it is a debuff, and it's how we're going to get some sort of a slow or a something on someone that's going to stop them from getting this attack. So having this little extra in here is nice. We will talk about Shockwave and how it actually does do a debuff here in a second. And remember that the Armor Break debuff is going to count towards this active debuff list. So you will be able to proc that. But this is a nice one to have. You can also go with the standard attack armor penetration, which just increases your standard attacks, like your heavy and light attacks. So this is probably going to be your best fundamental build. You can get away with not using exhaustive attacks, and like I said, the meteoric crater, and you could opt for some things like when they're below 30% health, your heavy attack does more damage, but it's going to be very situational. And then you could also opt for this hardened steel that gives you a little bit of damage reduction when you're using a heavy attack. It's definitely not bad, but from my experience, during a boss encounter, you're only going to be using the debuffs, and then you're going to be using your sword and shield. And for AoE attacks, you're probably not spamming this hammer thing too much. So I would probably go with this right here, as it will give you the most bang for your buck and allow you to do quite a lot of damage, as well as having good utility and ensuring that those debuffs are up constantly. And stamina regeneration is something that is more for players rather than monsters, but just having that extra debuff comfortability there is going to go a long way. So we're going to commit these points, and that will give us the ideal build here, which will do a lot of DPS. The other talents we haven't made too much use for, as we'll go ahead and head out here and start checking out how some of these abilities look versus some of the monsters. So I'll go ahead and fast forward to that. We're going to just walk into this high-level camp zone and see if we can get a few enemies on us to kind of demonstrate this build here. We're going to go ahead and aggro up this guy and a couple of these guys if they want to fight us. These guys don't look very alert. Okay, here we go. I got 1, 2, here is 3, and we need to grab a 4th guy, so hopefully one of these will come here. All right, perfect. So now we have 4 guys. As you can see, we can block a lot of their attacks, no problem. Let's go ahead and taunt them all with the Defiant Stance and hit them with the Shield Rush, putting the debuff on all of them. And here we will use Reverse Stab, and we just hit everybody, and as you can see, my defensive stance is back up. I can now use Defiant Stance again, hit them with the Shield Bash, and try to hit as many as I can, but there I only hit 1, so there is some skill into this. You need to make sure they're all aligned so you can hit all of them, as you will not get majority of your cooldowns back if you do not hit multiple opponents with that. So here we're going to go ahead and take a look at the set for this. So the basic attacks is going to be start off with a heavy 1, 2, and then maybe you could block, and then we'll hit them with the Shield Rush, and then the Reverse Stab to refund our cooldowns, and there's our Defiant Stance back, and our Shield Rush is coming back again in 1 to 2 seconds. It is now back up again. We'll hit them and just start off with a heavy attack, and then use a quick 1, 2, and kind of go from there. So this will make you very, very, very tanky. And now we can go into a bit of a demonstration for the Warhammer. The Warhammer is quite simple. You will start off with the Shockwave, and then you will charge up a heavy attack, and since they're all stunned, and then power through with this mighty gavel damage. There you can see a 3,500, and that is, these guys are resistant against strike damage, the Warhammer damage, so they are going to be very tanky versus that. They're taking 30% less, I believe, which is going to be a good indicator of how much DPS you can actually hit for. And keep in mind, this is not at 300 strength, and I also do not have the con, as I didn't use the food here, but if I used the food, I would be, I'd probably be at like 1,300, 1,200 or 1,300 health, as well as getting that 20% armor. So that's just giving you a good demonstration of what happens if you don't have the most perfect gear. You're still incredibly tanky. So I can deal with a lot of these mobs very easily. But the general idea is just Shockwave into Armor Breaker and kind of go from there. There is a side note that I have here on the Warhammer, and that is going to be that Shockwave will also lower their armor with the talent. You can get a Warhammer or an armor piece that has a Sundering Shockwave effect, which will apply that damage reduction, that rend, at 18%. As you can see there, and it scales up to, I think, about 20%. So in total, you're going to get about 35% damage reduction, or armor reduction onto your opponent, which is going to make them take quite a lot more damage. All right. I hope this demonstration helps your understanding of how to tank, and it gives you a good idea on what to shoot for attributes as well as weapon mastery. I will swear by this build. It does a lot of damage. This is probably the best PVE build I have found. It gives you the biggest numbers, as well as providing that double rend for your team with both the Shockwave talent from the perks and the weapons at upwards towards 20% in the max. So that's going to be 20% increased damage on the mob, plus the talent for Armor Breaker, which is another 15. So you're going to be causing the monsters to deal 35% to take 35% more damage, and this is going to make you very tanky as well as let you do a ton of damage. So you're kind of like a triple threat, as you can do all things. You can CC, you can deal damage, and you have the HP to reduce the damage and the the armor and the mitigation. So once again, in combination, you're basically just going to aim for that perfect 300-200 stat distribution, 300 in strength, 200 in constitution, and you're going to have to use your food buffs as well as 600 gear score to get up there. If you're not up there already, which is, same case with me, I'm not up there, I'm just going to be aiming towards it. Just make sure you have this 200 con first, and then put the rest of your points in strength. You will increase your damage along the way, and if you get up towards that 300, you'll start to see the added bonus of that grid attack being added to your light and heavy attacks, which will help you a lot with damage output, especially in PVE dungeons. So this is going to be my guide for the strength-based weapons for tanking. I think that this is the best combination. I use it personally. I pretty much run every single dungeon with it, and I would keep an eye out for those two talents if you can, the Shield Rush Fortify and the Shockwave Rend, as they are the ones that are worth using. I hope this helps everyone, and we will be taking a look at some more strength-based weapons, but from the DPS standpoint, next time we will take a look at the Great Axe, the Hatchet, and maybe a little bit at the Spear, although that is more of a dexterity weapon, as it scales off dex a lot higher than it does off strength. Alright, thank you for watching, everyone. I appreciate your time. Do keep in mind that we have the subscribe button down below. You can also like the video and hit the bell if you wish to support us. We also have a join button, which has a membership. You can get tons of perks, emojis, and badges from there, so make sure to check that one out, as well as a Discord where you can ask me questions and reach out to the community in general. Thanks for your time, and we will catch you in the next video, everyone.